Hi there, welcome to week 6. Getting close to the end. This week we're talking about sharing our digitized collections, providing access to all the materials that we've been hypothetically or actually digitizing for the past several weeks. So, we're going to talk about providing access. We're going to talk a little bit about collection management systems. We're going to kind of cover a tiny bit of web content accessibility, and we're going to talk about outreach a little bit, sharing all of this material and how we do that. So, as we're thinking about providing access to these digitized materials, this is a very good time to look back at the initial project planning phase from week 2, the plan and prioritize week, because that was the week you were thinking about the goals of your project. Why are you doing this and who are you doing it for? And that will help you make some decisions in this week about what it is you want to share and how you want to share it. As we talked about in week 3, this is really all starting to come together now, the obtain permissions week. There are several ethical considerations for knowing what is appropriate to share. So now that you know more about what you're digitizing and how you're digitizing it, how you're describing it, you can dig into the sharing a little bit more. What were the items from that obtain permissions week that you thought maybe shouldn't be shared or that you might want to treat with some special attention in terms of access? Again, this is another place why it's so important to keep your project goals in mind, because if you have materials that you're not quite sure about but you do want to share, what are the ways you can meet the project goals while still treating those digitized materials respectfully? And then, as we've talked about, you're not required to provide freely available online access to digital material just because you've digitized it. And a few of you have family collections or personal collections that your goal is not a publicly available online access. But is there a way that you can provide, just family or just community access without it being publicly available online? Some of you are going to have collections that are only available on site, which is also another fantastic option for sharing. So, just a little bit about collections management systems. Several of you who are already working in libraries or archives already have access to a content management or collection management system. And most of you already had a guess all the way back in week 2, the planning week, about how you might want to provide access, either limited or unlimited, to the materials you're digitizing. So if your organization already has a collections management system and you're locked into that, you might not have a lot of options here, but at least knowing what resources are out there and where to find them will be useful in case you're ever out, shopping for other options in the future. I'd also recommend going back to that list of the different collections that are online to browse for examples of what some of these look like in practice and in use. One of the resources for your readings this week is the Collections Management System collection spreadsheet. It's super useful. Lots of folks I know who are working in archives use it. If you're already working in a library or an archive, you may have seen this before or used it before. Just browsing through the different collection management system options and the comments is really informative about what the different systems can do. Also, if you are ever in a position of looking for a new collection management system, those categories along the top line, the first row, are basically the features you would be looking for if you're searching for a new system. You'll see that the Internet Archive is not listed as a CMS on the spreadsheet because it's not really, it's mostly just an access point. Some organizations use the Internet Archive as an access point because it's pretty easy to use. It's free or relatively low cost. I just want to point out here that I might recommend against using that. I don't think that I would recommend the Internet Archive. It's a pretty big target for hackers because it is so large and so heavily used. And just last month, a really bad hack took the entire site offline for 10 days. So that means anyone who is sharing their materials via the Internet Archive only had no online access to their items for those 10 days. So just consider carefully if Internet Archive is an option you want to use. A collection management system being your access point is just that. It's just an access point. It's not for digital storage. And what I mean by that is that CMSs like Content DM, Omeka, etc., they will allow you to buy digital storage from them to put your items online. But the more digital storage you have to buy, the more expensive it is. So typically, what archivists do is store their super high quality preservation files offline on servers or hard drives, which we'll talk more about next week. And they put the lower quality, lower resolution, smaller files into the CMS for sharing. So this is why in the Digitize week a couple weeks ago, we talked so much about primary files versus access files. What that difference means is that if a patron finds the image or item online in a lower quality version, but then wants to use it printed or at a higher resolution, they contact you for the high quality file. However, for personal collections like some of you have, recipe files and family collections, you might just elect to scan sort of a middle of the road quality or even lower quality and only have that one version of the files depending on your sharing needs. And then last thing, if you are the creator of items in your collection or you know the creators like in family collections, you could also consider applying Creative Commons licenses online. And you can read more about that in the Digital Readiness Toolkit. Creative Commons licenses are for original work. So they're for if you're the creator of something. You can read about that a little bit more if you're interested or ask me. There's a section in the Digital Readiness Toolkit on web accessibility, and this is an important set of considerations for sharing digitized materials. You're sharing these for your audience to be able to access, right? And that means providing access in a number of different ways. I won't read you the section from the toolkit here, but there's a couple questions in this week's assignment on how you plan to improve accessibility, like text descriptions of images, OCR software, and transcripts and captions. Sharing, of course, also means if you're making these publicly available, getting the word out to to whatever your community is about what it is that you're doing. And even if it's not publicly available, think about. So we'll talk about family collections first or personal collections. If you plan to share this with others, who is interested in it? People in your family, people who are members of a particular type of community or group. How are you planning to share it with them, even if it's not publicly available? Is there going to be a password, a protected area of the site? Are you going to share it with them via email? Are you going to post on social media? What's your plan for that? If this is going to be publicly available for an organization or institution, what are the communication channels you're going to use to get the word out about this particular collection? Social media, press releases, newsletters, emails, that kind of thing. And what kinds of project partners might be interested in the collection, and how can you think creatively about who those project partners could be or who might be interested? For instance, there are some really cool archives projects that use digitized collections with students or artists, and they welcome people to download digital items and then make new types of art or other new works out of them. I taught a seventh grade class about primary sources, and they downloaded different text items from a particular collection and made blackout poems out of them. If you're thinking about things like that, what other groups are interested in this subject that is subject or subjects that are contained in your digital collection? And then lastly, aggregators consider, things like the Digital Public Library of America or whatever the, content aggregator might be in your state. There's also content aggregators based on subjects. So there's a digital transgender archive that pulls in metadata from lots of different collections in different institutions that all deal with transgender people and history. There's other ones based on other subjects, I'm sure, but the one that comes to top of mind is Digital Public Library of America. So, if your state has a hub of the Digital Public Library of America, are you able to participate in that? So that's it. Pretty short lecture this week. This week, as usual, there's a worksheet for some sharing questions and then discussion and response. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be turning in the final project plan. So that means all of the weeks that you've done so far, going back and incorporating any feedback and making any changes based on what you've learned. Because this week is a little bit lighter week, you might want to consider spending some extra time this week on some of that revision happening. And of course, as always, get in touch with me if you've got questions. This coming week is election week, and it's also a big library conference week here in Wisconsin. And so I don't know who decided to schedule a library conference the week of the election, but I will probably be even slower than usual to respond this week. But if you need something urgently, let me know. And otherwise, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks, everybody.